I think the thing that would surprise us most is to learn that foreigners could actually be born within the United States for a long stretch of American history. Specifically, before the Civil War and before the ratification of the 14th Amendment, it was not clear that everyone born within the United States was a US citizen. And in fact, at the state levels and also at the federal levels, various native-born groups could be classified as aliens, right? Among them Native Americans and free blacks. I would say that the idea of foreignness, if we look over the long span of American history, has changed in the sense that we now tend to think of the foreigner as someone being exclusively someone coming from outside the country, right? The idea of the native-born foreigner has sort of gone away as a result of a whole raft of legal and constitutional changes. But the further back in American history one looks, Native Americans born within tribes, for instance, were not considered American citizens. And they were treated in many ways like immigrants. So I think that one of the great continuities of American history is these periodic outbursts of nativism. We seem to be undergoing now an outburst of nativism vis-a-vis Latin and Central American immigrants, but also against Muslim immigrants. But if we look back over the long span of American history, there have been numerous outbursts against different kinds of Protestants, against Catholics, against Asians, against Eastern and Southern Europeans, against Jews, and so on. This is something that Americans need to know, even as they sort of direct their attention to people coming in now. But I think the really important thing that we should pay attention to are the consequences of a development that's relatively new, which is immigration federalism, which is the assertion by states and localities of their rights to pass laws affecting immigrants. This is something that actually was very common before the Civil War, before the federal government took over regulation of immigration. And so different states would have their own policies dealing with immigrants. And there's a lot of conversation in the academic literature about a sort of return to that world. That carries some dangers with it. And the dangers are that it could affect Americans as well. So the pre-Civil War world of state borders were really existed in order to keep out free blacks or Native Americans and people like that. And there's a danger that, in fact, a return to a world of internal borders would affect not just immigrants, but also American citizens. The parallels have always been strong, and this is also something to keep in mind when we want to think about immigration, is that every legal act that's undertaken against immigrants actually has consequences for citizens. When we keep people out, we keep out the relatives of people inside. When we deport them, we break up families. When we deny immigrants welfare, it's actually citizen children who bear the consequences. But the parallels go beyond that. So I think in the late 20th century, for instance, one very striking parallel is the parallel between the mass incarceration of racial minorities in this country and a parallel move towards mass deportation of Latin American immigrants principally. So, and you can see over the course of time in the context of welfare reform, in the context of anti-communism, right? So anti-communist efforts vis-a-vis immigrants have had parallels in anti-communist efforts vis-a-vis American citizens. So the parallels can be traced throughout American history, I would say.